welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching Smile 2, the sequel to Smile 1. And yeah, whenever we do a sequel to one of these horror movies where it's like a curse situation that just gets passed on along people, sort of like The Ring or maybe The Grudge even a little bit, you know, we always kind of run the risk of essentially just making the same movie again, right? Because that is, I guess, the general premise. This thing is spreading from one person to another, and so it's just gonna happen again, right? And the first Smile was kind of a surprise. You know, I feel like when we first started seeing the trailers of like, oh, it's creepy people smiling at someone and they're the only ones who can see it, and we're like, wait, didn't that movie Truth or Dare come out like only a couple months before this? And I feel like there was a lot of like cross-pollination of like in the marketing, people thinking that this was that, but it was kind of a surprise, you know, like it was a very effective sort of psychological thriller. We saw this person kind of break down over the course of the movie and, you know, slowly become somewhat of an unreliable narrator, or at the very least the things that the protagonist is seeing becomes more unreliable as the movie goes along, because it's, you know, the curse or demon or whatever it is messing with their minds. So walking into this movie, I was like, okay, so how do you do a sequel where it's not just the exact same thing, where you're hitting the same beats, you know, someone else gets infected with whatever this smile thing is, no one believes them, they slowly start going crazy, a bunch of stuff happens, but then it turns out, oh no, that's not really what happened. You know, like, how do you avoid hitting these exact same beats over and over again, like just like the first movie, right? So you're kind of in a tricky spot, because obviously people are going to Smile 2 to see more of this, but also it's like you can't just make the same movie again. And I feel like they managed to do a pretty decent job of, you know, making the movie an actual sequel. It's the same curse, it's the same thing as last time, but because they changed the setting so much and they changed the protagonist like drastically in their whole life situation, this time we're following a pop star who has to deal with the stress of celebrity and the stress of having a past addiction problem, and, you know, like, everything you do is being followed by cameras and people are always looking at you and noticing you in public because you're a celebrity, you know? So like, it does kind of add even more of a heightened sense of, like, I guess dread, or at least anxiety as you're watching this thing, because you're like, you know, not only is this person being, you know, followed by this presence and seeing these smiling faces everywhere, but like they have to deal with normal stuff like a stalker fan, or, you know, like just the fact that, oh, I can't call the cops right now because then everyone will know, you know, like I have to watch out for my reputation, you know, like I can't just be seen here, you know. So stuff like that happens. And I feel like that did a decent job of adding a lot of elements to it. Now, having said that, the movie definitely does hit a lot of the same beats again, right? Like you're, you know, like, okay, this person's seeing stuff, and then immediately in the next scene, oh, that thing didn't really happen. That was just in your mind. That was just a dream, whatever. And I will say, while the first movie did that, you know, on occasion, where it's like that thing didn't actually happen, or you're not actually talking to who you think you're talking to, it was usually done in kind of quick successions, you know, like it would happen for a second and then she would realize like, oh wait, you can't be here in front of me because the person that I'm supposed to be talking to is calling me right now, so, oh no, I'm talking to the monster, you know. This movie kind of pushes that to, I would say, kind of an insane degree, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was pretty effective at some points. On other hands, it like got excessive a little bit, to where it was like, okay, once you realize how unreliable everything you're seeing is, as an audience member, you might start to not care as much. You know, you might start to be like, okay, but is this even happening? Or are they gonna do yet another reveal that everything I've seen in the last 10 minutes was not actually real? You know, like how many times can you press that button? And they press that button quite a few times in this movie. So on one hand, it's pretty effective for like a jump scare or just general horror vibes of like, oh my god, did this really happen? Is this really happening? I can't even tell anymore. So I guess in that way you kind of get just as lost as the protagonist is, but it does kind of make it a little aggravating as a viewer, because you're like, is what I'm seeing now, is this whole tension that's being built up, is this gonna just be revealed to be nothing in like 5 minutes? So in order to really talk about that, I will have to talk about spoilers in a minute, and I'll get into that. But overall, this movie, I would say it's pretty effective. It's got a lot of decent, like, interesting ways of sort of furthering the lore, and I will say it ends in a very strong place that holds a lot of promise if they decide to make another movie, which I imagine that they will. I haven't been keeping track of the box office, but it's a horror movie. They don't have to make a lot of money for them to be profitable and then make another one, right? So the way this one ends, I'm like, okay, you could do something very, very different here. So hopefully they do that. But as a sequel to that first one, I would say this is a pretty effective sequel. It does hit a lot of the same beats, but they try their best to like make it different while still being the same curse and the same, it's just a different person going through the same stuff. And I feel like they do as much work as they can while still making it basically the same premise. So yeah, that's Smile 2. I'm gonna go into some spoilers now, because the spoilers here are really my only kind of criticism with this movie. And I don't know if anyone else really feels this way, but as I'm walking out, I'm like, it kind of bothers me a little bit. So here we go. All right, so in the third act of this movie, okay, we have a moment where our character was knocked unconscious and they wake up in a hospital, and basically this sets off the third act where things just get crazy to, turn it to 11 degree, like it gets really insane. The main protagonist ends up like, she thinks that the monster has possessed her mom, and then the monster's killing the mom, but then it's actually her because she's holding the thing, and then her mom's dead, and then she has to escape from this wellness center that she's been, like this rehab center that she's been checked into, and so she has to pull a gun on everyone, and everyone's freaking out, and then she steals a car, and she's with her best friend that has shown up in the whole movie. And then we have this big reveal here in the third act that, oh, her best friend that's been with her the entire movie, she gets a phone call, and it's the friend, and she's like, oh, hey, you left me a message like a week ago, sorry I didn't pick up, I'm talking to you now. Which means that for the entirety of the movie, that friend was not really there, right? Which, okay, other movies have done stuff like that, and I guess they managed to make it work because, if you notice, yeah, no one else interacted with this friend, so this character has been imaginary the whole time. Not a big deal, we've seen that happen before, right? So okay, that's the first twist. The second twist, she goes all the way to a meeting spot where she met this guy who had been researching this, right? And he comes up with this plan of like, well, if we temporarily kill you before the curse is able to kill you, like planned in front of somebody in a horrific way, if we're able to end your life here and then bring you back to life, then that should like break the curse, right? Because you died, but not in front of anyone and not in some horrific way, so like, it doesn't get passed on, and then it's over, right? That's the plan. And so she has like this big final showdown with like this past version of herself that's been haunting her this entire time because she made stupid decisions in her past that caused all this trauma, right? Like, and that's the thing, the curse feeds on the trauma of the past, right? Then the end of the movie does this thing where she's fighting the monster, and the monster, you think it's all just in her head, right? Like the monster sends her out on stage during one of her pop show concerts, and you're like, okay, so, and you keep waiting for the other foot to drop of like, okay, when's the reveal that this concert is fake? And then, because she's on the run from the police, obviously she's not really at a concert right now. But then you know, because you see like the mom is still alive, and you see like everyone is still nice to her, so you're like, wait, okay, so this is definitely a dream. But then it turns out that no, this is the real life. This is really what's happening. She actually is at this concert, and she ends up basically the ending of the first movie happens again, where the demon comes out as this giant crazy smiling monster and then enters her and then makes her kill herself in front of all of these fans, thousands and thousands of people, right? Which is the great, kind of setup for potentially an amazing sequel, right? Because now thousands of people, I guess, are infected with this thing. But here's the problem, and this is really just my only kind of issue with the movie, is that like, because of this reveal that she's actually at the concert and her mom is not dead, and I guess you would say that nothing in the third act actually ended up happening at all, right? Like, she never escaped from this wellness center. She never drove to meet this guy who had this plan to kill her, and like none of that ended up happening. So then it makes you start thinking like, well, so the guy that had the plan, we had met him several times in the movie. If this whole final act never even happened, if she did end up going to this concert and going through with this, what does that mean? Was he ever real? Like, was that also just, like, you just start kind of pulling apart different sections of the movie, because you're like, well, when is this concert happening? Was this like at the halfway mark in the movie, and then everything past that was just in her head, and so it's kind of that double-edged sort of like, it's very interesting and it's very crazy of a twist, but also like, is this gonna stand up on a second rewatch where I'm like, okay, so none of this is happening? Like, I don't know. It's interesting, but also I don't know how many more times you can kind of get away with that. Like, the first movie did that in its own third act, but it only lasted maybe 5 minutes. Like, she thought she had beaten the monster, and then she went off to, have a normal life for a couple days, and then it turned out, nope, none of that was real. That didn't really happen. This one, like, does that to an insane degree, because we sat there for, what felt like a good hour, and then you're telling us the last hour did not happen, so it feels like a more extreme version of that, and it might upset some people, because you're like, okay, so I watched all that for no reason. Her mom's not actually dead. You can almost like skip right to whenever it really happened. I don't know, it's an interesting kind of twist, but I do feel like it's something that it's gonna wear out its welcome pretty quick, especially because this movie has done that several times already. You've had several fake outs, so for them to do this final fake out where it's like, oh, the entire last hour was a fake out, it's like, I guess I don't know. Fine, I guess. Anyways, that's really my only kind of gripe with the movie, is that, like, I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe if you're gonna say that a big chunk of it was fake, maybe don't make the whole thing fake. Make like a section, like the friend not ever really being there the entire movie. Like, okay, that's kind of cool, but to then be like, oh yeah, none of this, the escape from the place, the killing of the mom, meeting this guy, none of this happened. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I will say, she is wearing the outfit that at about halfway through the movie she says she's not gonna wear at the concert, and in the ending scene she is wearing that outfit. So I guess you could almost say that, like, maybe that is when this transition happened, to where it's like, it's all it's all in her head from that point on. I don't know. But let's talk about the ending real quick. So obviously, we're still talking about spoilers here. The very ending, where she has offed herself in front of thousands of her fans, it sets up this interesting idea that you can make another movie, which they probably will, where instead of just following one protagonist and no one believes them, instead you basically have this epidemic on your hands, where thousands of people only have about 4 or 5 days before this thing is gonna kill them. But there are now thousands of people out there who are going to be able to share these stories, post it on the internet. Like, it's gonna be like this kind of weird phenomenon where, like, oh, it's not just like one crazy person talking about seeing stuff. It's thousands of people who are all at this concert who all saw this thing. You know what I mean? Like you have space here to like really explore some interesting like concepts of like, you know, it's basically now like a global virus that's going to spread, because now you have to imagine that after the 4 or 5 days, a lot of those people are gonna, you know, they're gonna off themselves in front of even more people, and it's just gonna keep spreading like that, right? So like there's a lot of cool interesting things you could do with like, well, how do we stop this? You know, like world governments are gonna have to get involved to be like, how do we stop a curse? It's not a virus, it's a curse, but it's acting like a virus basically. So like, you know, do you just quarantine everyone who has it? Like, how do you you know, like there's a lot of kind of cool concepts. So hopefully whenever they inevitably make a third one, hopefully they don't just do the same thing again, where you like just pick a protagonist, everyone thinks they're crazy, and they have to figure out all the rules, but then they lose at the end anyways. Like, hopefully you can like let it be different, you know, like we've done that twice, we don't need to do it a third time. So anyways, yeah, that is Smile 2. I enjoyed this one a lot. I just, you know, I have a little bit of gripes with some of like the, you know, maybe one too many twists in there, and they're like really trying to get you. And I understand, like you feel like maybe you gotta one up the first movie, but you know, try to be different. Don't try to just do the same thing but more. You know, like there's a difference there. So I don't know, but that's just me. Otherwise, I still really enjoyed this movie. I feel like it has a lot of effective moments. There's especially a scene where she's being chased around her apartment by a group, and it is actually kind of terrifying, you know, and it didn't involve like excessive amounts of gore or anything like that. It was just really creepy movement, and I was like, wow, that yeah, that would be terrifying if this was happening. So yeah, pretty cool. Anyways, that is Smile 2, and I'll see you guys later.